They thought my silence meant weakness, that because I didn't interrupt in meetings or shout over people, I didn't have ideas. They praised the loud ones, the ones who said everything twice and delivered nothing, and they said I was too quiet to lead. But quiet doesn't mean passive. Quiet means watching. Quiet means listening. And while they were performing leadership, I was building real influence. So when things finally fell apart, they didn't see who stepped in, until I was already at the head of the table. Here's how I took over, without raising my voice. The moment it happened was so casual, I almost missed it. It was a Wednesday, mid-afternoon, that sleepy post-lunch stretch where no one's really paying attention. I had just presented my quarterly ops update. Clean, on time, under budget. My slides were efficient, clear, not flashy, just solid work, like always. As I packed up my laptop, I overheard it. 2 managers near the coffee machine. One of them, David, leaned in and said, "She's good, yeah, but she's just not a leadership type." "Too quiet," the other added. "No presence." They weren't whispering because they were afraid of being overheard. They whispered because they didn't think I mattered enough to hear it. I didn't flinch, didn't confront. I just walked past them like I hadn't heard a thing. But I heard everything. It wasn't the first time someone had mistaken my calm for weakness, or my lack of small talk for lack of ambition. I wasn't the kind who stayed late just to be seen. I didn't barge into other teams' spaces or interrupt during meetings just to sound important. That wasn't me. I was the one people came to after the noise, the one who fixed things, quietly, so someone else could take credit out loud. But that day, the whisper, the certainty with which they dismissed me, it lit a spark I didn't know I had. I didn't want revenge, not yet. What I wanted was proof. So I started watching them, documenting every misstep, every overpromised KPI, every missed deadline, every smile hiding disorganization. They said I was too quiet to lead? Good. That meant they'd never hear me coming. There's a kind of silence that isn't peaceful. It's strategic. That's where I lived. Right at the edge of the conference table, with my notepad open and my mouth shut. They always left one empty chair. Not for me. For someone from senior. Sometimes they filled it. Sometimes they didn't. But I was always there, in the same spot. Reliable. Prepared. Invisible. The thing is, being invisible is underrated. People forget you're listening. They forget to guard their words. They forget to protect their egos. At that table, I learned everything. I watched how Jenna, the one with the too loud laugh and the LinkedIn-worthy phrases, talked over quieter teammates, then repackaged their ideas in bullet points with her initials. I saw how David smiled and nodded during strategy meetings, then privately redirected projects through Slack so his team got credit for my fixes. They weren't smart. They were noisy. But noise only works until results are needed. And results don't care how confident you sound. I kept my notes, built my files, not in some spiteful I'll get you back way. At first, it was habit, pattern recognition. But the more I saw, the clearer it became. They weren't just ignoring me. They were using me. That quarter, our department missed 2 major goals. Not mine. Ours. Because they mismanaged timelines, overpromised to clients, and sugar-coated status reports. When the VPs asked what went wrong, they fumbled through excuses. I already had a fix on their desks. 3 slides, 1 page of recommendations, fully backed by data, cross-team input, and deliverable recovery windows. The kind of solution that gets remembered. Jenna called it aggressively proactive. David called it a little overstepping. The VP called it impressive. That was the first time I saw him really look at me. I didn't smile. I didn't say, "Told you so." I just nodded, took my notes, and left. Still invisible, on purpose, because I wasn't ready to lead the room yet. But I was already building the one I'd take over. It was supposed to be my moment. The end of quarter review had gone better than expected. My metrics were clean. Team performance up. My process doc, the one I'd quietly rewritten from scratch, had been cited in 2 other departments. I had delivered on every single initiative without a single escalation. So when our director announced he'd be stepping back to pursue an exciting opportunity in private consultancy, I already knew who was going to replace him. Or I thought I did. They gathered us in the conference room. Jenna was chewing gum. David was pretending not to sweat through his overpriced blazer. And I sat still, hands folded, every instinct in my body screaming, "This is it." Our VP stood at the front of the room, smiling that tight, rehearsed smile. "This department has seen some real growth this quarter," he began. "Thanks to the hard work of so many of you, we're heading into the next phase of our expansion stronger than ever." My heart thudded once, twice. Then he said it, which is why I'm happy to announce David as the new department lead. Applause. Polite, awkward applause. Except from Jenna. She actually clapped hard enough to seem supportive. My fingers stayed laced together in my lap. David smiled like he couldn't believe it either. Because he couldn't. He looked right at me across the table, and I swear there was guilt in his eyes. Not regret. Guilt. That subtle, sickening flicker of someone who knows they're standing on a platform built by someone else. The meeting ended. People dispersed. He gave a little thank you speech in the hallway that sounded more like a stand-up routine. I didn't say anything, didn't congratulate him. Instead, I went back to my desk, opened my private folder marked Ops Recovery Internal, and added a new entry. Promotion passed over. No rationale given. Pattern of recognition misalignment confirmed. Because this wasn't a surprise, it was proof. They didn't see leadership in me, because they didn't know what leadership looked like when it wasn't dressed in charisma and corporate charm. But I wasn't crushed. I was focused. Let them have their title. I'd take the entire department. Quietly, strategically, and permanently. It was buried in the quarterly operations roll-up. Page 14. Line 7. A line item that looked completely routine until you knew what you were looking for. A misreported vendor contract. To most people, it would have passed as an innocent clerical oversight. But I had been the one tracking that project 6 months prior, before David restructured the reporting tree. I knew the numbers. I knew the vendors. And I knew that someone had signed off on a service that was never delivered. $38,000. Gone. And no one noticed. Not Jenna. Not David. Not the VP. But I did. I stared at it for 10 minutes. Not because I was shocked. It was actually kind of expected by now. I stared because I knew this was the kind of error that could crack the entire surface of their performance. I didn't report it. Not yet. Instead, I verified. Quietly. Pulled contract copies. Cross-checked PO numbers. I even spoke to the vendor rep under the pretense of updating procurement records. She confirmed the truth. The service had been canceled. No work done. No refund issued. But someone had still logged it as completed. David. He'd signed off on it personally. A corner cut. Maybe to make his monthly metrics look clean. Maybe because he thought no one would look that deep. They were right. No one else did. And that's when I realized something deeper than the mistake itself. They had stopped looking beneath the surface because they assumed they were untouchable. That was their real weakness. Because when you believe you're the only one who matters in the room, you stop checking your blind spots. And I had just found theirs. I added it to the folder, labeled it Integrity Gap, created a subfolder of documentation, screenshots, email chains, a paper trail long enough to hang a career from. Then I did the most dangerous thing I could possibly do. I kept working like nothing had changed. Because power in silence, it's not just about not speaking. It's about letting people think you still don't see them until it's far too late. I used to think being quiet was a strength, that if I worked hard, stayed out of drama, and delivered without noise, someone would notice. They didn't. Not when I fixed broken workflows. Not when I picked up tasks no one else wanted. Not even when David stood in front of the entire department and presented my strategy like he wrote it himself. So I stopped waiting for recognition, and I started writing things down. Every late email, every missed number, every time someone else got credit for my work. I didn't speak up. I didn't complain. I documented. I created a folder at home. Simple name, Ops Notes. Inside, everything they didn't think I saw. Screenshots, Slack threads, mismatched numbers, project decks with my sections cut out and rebranded. I even saved timestamps from meetings. How Jenna cut people off. How David promised things we couldn't deliver. How the room laughed when someone called me dependable, not dynamic. They thought I was just organized. But I was building a record. Quietly. Carefully. Not to attack them. To protect myself. Because I knew the day would come when something would go wrong, and they'd need a scapegoat. I made sure it wouldn't be me. They called me quiet. Fine. But I wasn't invisible anymore. I was ready. It started with a goodbye email. You know the kind. After much reflection, I've decided to pursue a new opportunity, followed by too many exclamation points and a smiley face at the end. Jared was first. Quiet guy from data integration. Smart. Steady. Always 2 steps ahead on forecasts. He left with 2 weeks' notice and barely a ripple in the office. David barely mentioned it, just reassigned his workload to 3 different people and moved on. Then came Anika, UX lead. One of the few voices that ever spoke up in meetings without needing a spotlight. She was gone before the end of the month. Her exit email didn't even include the word opportunity. It just said, "Thank you to those who truly collaborated." That was when I knew. People weren't just leaving for growth. They were leaving because of the leadership. They were tired of being overlooked, overworked, talked over. The loudest people in the room were being rewarded for noise, not results. And those who actually built the company's backbone were done pretending they didn't see it. And it was happening faster than HR could spin it. By the 3rd resignation, Jenna started showing up to meetings with under-eye concealer and tight smiles. David started forwarding emails he didn't understand to junior staff with vague instructions like, "Run with this." And me? I just kept working. Quietly. Steadily. While chaos bloomed around them, I watched the cracks widen, deadlines slip. Clients asked the same question more than once. Department morale sank. But no one above seemed to notice. They were too busy defending their positions, too distracted by turnover to ask why it was happening. But I knew. Because while they were scrambling to plug holes, I had already built the lifeboat. It didn't happen with a speech. There was no dramatic meeting, no announcement. It started with a calendar invite. Quick sync? From Jenna. Subject line, Team Stability Check-In. At first, I thought it was a mistake. We hadn't had a one-on-one in over a year. She barely looked at me in meetings, unless she was quoting my work as her own. But I accepted. She showed up to the call looking tired. Not her usual coffee and conquer energy. She talked about morale, alignment, and how things were just a little chaotic lately. Then she said it. I was hoping you could help steady things. There it was. Not a compliment. Not an apology. A quiet admission. She needed me. A few hours later, another ping. This time from David. Same tone. Same avoidance of blame. Same vague suggestion that maybe I could help get things back on track. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I listened. And I said the most powerful sentence I had. I'll see what I can do. That's when the shift began. People started coming to me first, asking if I had time to review decks, to look at timelines, to lead stand-ups, unofficially at first. Then it became routine, expected, normal. Jenna still signed off on documents. David still sat at the head of the table. But everyone looked at me when it was time to make a decision. Quietly. Naturally. Without needing to say it. I was leading. And they didn't even realize they'd handed me the wheel. There was no title change. No HR memo. No badge or bump in pay. But by the end of that month, I was managing the entire department. Unofficially. The team started looping me into every thread. Designers asked me about priorities. Analysts double-checked projections with me before presenting. New hires thought I was their actual supervisor. And to be honest, I didn't correct them. Because the truth was, I was the one keeping everything together. I was the one they trusted. Not because I asked for power, but because I had quietly earned it. Jenna began deferring to me in meetings. David stopped offering opinions unless he'd seen mine first. Even the VP started including me in leadership syncs. Not as a guest, but as if I already belonged there. I didn't speak more. I didn't change my tone. But I didn't have to anymore. I had presence. The kind you don't build by speaking over people. The kind that shows up in the results. The kind that earns respect, not attention. One Thursday, the intern knocked on my door and asked if I'd approve her PTO request. I paused, then nodded, and she thanked me, like I was her manager. That night, I stayed late. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to get something right. Not for David. Not for a performance review. For the team. For the version of myself I used to doubt. I looked around the office. Empty desks. Quiet monitors. This was the same place where I'd once been invisible. Now? I ran it. And no one even had to say it out loud. The annual review cycle came around like clockwork. Emails went out. Calendars filled up. People braced themselves, most for disappointment, a few for applause. I didn't expect much. I'd been here before. Years of solid work, steady output, calm reliability. Always returned with, keep it up. Solid contributor. Team player. I didn't want praise this time. I wanted clarity. The VP scheduled mine late in the week. Friday morning, 10 a.m. His office was cleaner than usual. No coffee mug rings on the desk. No clutter. Just my review packet face down. He didn't start with small talk. He just looked at me and said, "You've kept this department from falling apart." I waited. Said nothing. He turned over the packet. "You're mentioned by name in more feedback forms than any manager in this building, including the ones who actually are managers." My hand stayed still in my lap. "You're not loud. You're not flashy. But people follow you. That's leadership. Whether you want the title or not, you're already doing the job. That's when I realized this wasn't a review. It was a test. He wanted to see how I'd react, whether I'd ask for more, whether I'd demand what I'd earned. But I didn't need to. I looked him in the eye and simply said, "If I'm already doing the job, then give me the title." Silence. Then a slow nod, the kind that says, "Finally." I walked out of that room without the paper, but I didn't need it to know. The shift was no longer unofficial. The department had already changed hands. This was just the paperwork catching up. There was no confetti, no big announcement, no office-wide celebration, just a quiet calendar update. My title changed on the org chart, Department Manager, and suddenly, the same people who once called me too quiet to lead were tagging me in threads, asking for sign-offs, forwarding proposals with, "Let me know if you'd like changes." The difference wasn't the title, it was the authority I already had, now visible. The first time I led a department-wide meeting, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't start with buzzwords. I just walked in, nodded to the room and said, "Let's make this simple. We know what's broken. Now we fix it, together." No one interrupted. No one second-guessed. They just listened, because they'd already been following me for months. They just didn't realize it until now. Jenna eventually transferred to another division. David took a leave to explore new ventures, whatever that meant. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The team worked better. Deadlines were cleaner. People spoke more freely. Trust grew in the silence where politics used to live. I kept my same desk, same notebook, same calm voice. But now when I spoke, the room leaned in. They once said I was too quiet to lead. But silence is where real leadership grows. Not in volume, in consistency, in clarity, in presence. The department didn't need noise. It needed direction. And now, it's mine.